So this time last year, things were quite interesting in my practice. Things were not altogether well, and I came and gave a fairly candid account of what I felt I'd done wrong up to that point, and was a bit short of time getting onto the things I felt I'd done right, but that information is available. So as you can tell from the first slide, things kind of went from bad to worse for me, and I'm not going to pull any punches on that. That's I'm not here to talk about rampant success. I'm here to tell you how it's been, and really to go into the kind of more difficult side of how things can be. So this was the main slide from last year on things I felt that had not gone well, or mistakes that one can make, and most, but not all of these are mistakes I indeed made myself. I'm not going to go through this in detail. The slides from today will be available. This is being broadcast. Last year was broadcast. So things that turned out to be critical for my practice from September last year onwards would be, from that data set, would be this subset. So we've got 6 things that went critical for us last autumn, and that I'll talk in a bit more detail about now. So flawed business model, so in order for, frankly, me to find my work personally interesting, I need a lot of diversity. I can deal with that, but that's a skill in itself. And I'm a reasonably experienced structural engineer, and most of my staff are less experienced than myself. Diversity is an issue in a workload, because you're not repeating the same tasks day in, day out, and there are a lot of different types of work out there. So unless you've got a lot of repetition, which is pretty dull, to be honest, your economies are going to be different to those of a company that's just cookie-cuttering jobs all day, every day. Your staff might stay around longer. We'll come back to that later on. They might be more stimulated, but they'll also gain a lot more experience faster and maybe discover that they want to do something that you don't do. So it's a real double-edged sword. So I think perhaps in making my practice in my own image in that respect, I made a problem for myself. When I look at commercially successful practices around me, certainly in Scotland, they're all doing a lot of the same thing. Inadequate time and cost controls. Well, we've got good systems, but it's getting people to apply them that's the problem. People don't generally become engineers because they want to manage costs. They become engineers because they like designing things. So the process of getting the people who work for you to control costs, seek more money when more work is done, and so on and so forth, is a time-consuming one. It's a difficult one. It's pretty hard to get people who don't want to do something to do something. That's just human nature. I'm the same, but that can be a big problem in practice, especially if you're busy yourself trying to do a lot of things. It's difficult to monitor what other people are doing all the time. And then that kind of moves neatly into new work generation. There's always natural wastage. Clients come, clients go, projects finish, projects are one-offs, they have to be replaced. Frameworks come and frameworks go. You have to generate new work, and that means brand new work, new people you haven't worked for before. It's not more work from the same people. We got up to a size where that task in itself became really time-consuming and incredibly necessary, and we actually didn't have the resources to do it. So there was a kind of high tide mark that we kind of washed up to, and then, as this talk goes on, you'll see what happened after that. But new work generation was an issue for us. As we're creeping overheads, we expanded. We got up to 2+ officers and 10 or 11 staff, and we wanted the staff to be happy and properly resourced, and to have good technical resources. That was very much my thing, our thing. We wanted to show respect for our staff by having good resources. We'd all worked in practices that were under-resourced, where you didn't have the technical information you needed, and we weren't going to go down that road. So we spent a lot of money on good resources, good software, up-to-date software, membership of things like IHS, it's extremely expensive, and so on and so forth. That was all right while we had the frameworks and things were expanding and so on and so forth. But when things tightened up, the fact that the overheads had just crept and crept and crept was difficult. We had two offices, our two offices were in relatively close proximity in Edinburgh and Glasgow. That's a kind of local company structure. So, and we attracted some bigger company work because we punched above our weight in some respects. But in many ways, we were a small company structure doing quite a bit of small company work, but with bigger company overheads. And two offices, two nice offices, for example. They're not free. So that became an issue when things got tighter as well. And also, you know, another thing that's completely my own responsibility is employing the wrong people for the task. So this harks back to things like new work generation and time and cost controls. Employing people is difficult. Employing people is difficult in so many different ways. And you're always taking a bit of a chance when you employ people. And I employed good people. People who are nice people who were capable of really good technical work, and people who worked hard. They were not lazy people, but they weren't able to do everything. So we had quite expansive job descriptions because I needed people to all pull together on numerous different topics, and actually they either weren't able or really, really, really didn't want to do certain things. That's human nature. So that was a problem, and that was my fault really, because I should have interviewed better, or applied more appropriate job descriptions, or recognized problems earlier on and resolved them in positive ways. So that's a really big one. Employing people is very hard. And the last one's insecure office provision. We got thrown out of our offices. The people that we were renting office space from, they had financial issues of their own, and they had to sell half of the building, and we were in the wrong half, and we weren't a preferred tenant. So we got booted out. We had to go right in the middle of a general crisis for the company. We had to go and find a new office, which was pretty unwelcome. There you go. That's business. So in the firm, we also experienced a progressive decay of culture. So this is an uncomfortable topic to talk about, but I'm going to talk about it. So as the company got up to about 10 or 11 people, my role became floating around over the top, sprinkling the directorial fairy dust, trying to generate new work, because I'm quite good at that, and also be the technical expert and cajole people along, and checking work and doing design certifications we have in Scotland. That's a pretty big deal. And took my eye off the ball, to be quite frank about that. And we experienced a decay of the company culture, including the things on this list. Key is job finishing skills. Actually finishing a piece of work is a skill in itself, and getting people to finish work is a complex psychological issue. People are quite de-incentivized when it comes to finishing work, especially kind of not necessarily graduates, because they might not even realize they've finished it anyway, and maybe you've got them working on isolated technical tasks that they don't see the whole picture. But people don't like finishing things because that means the next challenge is coming. And they might not even realize that that's their mindset, but it so is. And I've seen it throughout my career. I've probably exhibited it myself. People don't want to finish things because the next problem, the next scary challenge is around the corner that makes them question themselves and their abilities, and makes them nervous about opening their emails on a Monday morning, and makes them think they might fail, and they might fail, and people hate failing, and it's complicated. We also had some interpersonal conflicts developing in the office. Not everybody gets on with everybody else. That's just a fact of life. And our customer service became patchy. People were hiding from problems. Things were, and this relates to things not getting finished, as does poor delivery, and indeed, in some cases, failure to deliver. It's a difficult one to talk about because this is all my responsibility, and I absolutely accept that. And if any of my former staff were watching this, I wouldn't want them to look at it and feel criticised, because I know that everyone tried hard, but everyone has their limitations, and their limitations that come from within and without. And the scenario that developed was actually we weren't delivering things, and that was extremely negative for the practice, and things became very difficult. We lost some key staff, and that put one of our offices into a non-functioning state, which was really difficult for everyone who was left. Really difficult circumstances to deal with, psychologically and business-wise. And the real key thing was that we lost half the frameworks that we were working on, so our turnover dropped by 30% overnight. Same staff, same offices, same overheads, 30% less income. That was pretty difficult. I felt a lot like that a lot of the time last autumn. So quick summary where we were last autumn. That's what we needed to bill, and that's what we were losing every month. You can't carry on like that. We were never a rich firm in the beginning. We had 2 partly functioning offices, not enough work, and a lot of anxiety. And all in all, it was a bit of a train crash. So what happened? There were 2 phases of action. This is the first one. Started talking to my clients, just went out and rang people up and said, I am very sorry. Can I come and talk to you? And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about what was happening in my company, ironically. And I learned a lot about what clients wanted, which wasn't altogether encouraging. They just wanted cheap. Cheap and quick, actually, was what people wanted. Quality was not particularly high on the list. And we'd always tried for quality. Whoops. We reduced costs wherever possible. Come back to that. We moved to new offices. Nice new office. We restaffed the struggling office quickly, which was expensive. Had to go through agencies. And we retreated to former sources of work, which was really small projects, but it was all we could get. And I started hammering all the staff hard about generating new work. They all responded. They all did well. They all did well with making an effort. So the results were a bit mixed. Limited success overall, and the losses didn't slow because we reduced costs wherever possible, but it was really just tinkering around the edges. You're not going to save that kind of money just tinkering around the edges. Had a lot of awkward moments, a lot of embarrassing conversations with clients, a lot of difficult conversations with staff, a lot of difficult conversations with myself. A lot of self-reflection. The small projects are generally low margin, and there were a lot of companies out there, especially in our area, tooled up to do it, cookie cutter, ka-chink, 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 and we were never tooled up to do that. We couldn't do it. We couldn't compete. Kept the staff busy, which was psychologically important, but we just carried on losing money. And that relates to the next point here, which is our business model was diversity. Do lots and lots of different interesting things, and it's just heinously inefficient. And our cost base was still fundamentally too high. That was us. Wasn't a great time. So second phase of action. Sometimes you've just got to do that. Effectively putting money back into the business. So then there was major surgery on the pair. We started saying no to certain work. We'd never really done that before because we'd always just been grow, do the work. So that was quite positive. It was quite empowering in a way. We went to the bank and created some breathing space. The bank were really great, I have to say. They were very helpful to us. I went back into the design office, both physically and psychologically. I stopped having an office of my own. We just turned that into a conference room and leisure space, actually. And I went back out onto the design office and sat among the staff doing the work, which was a big improvement. I learnt a lot. And then we closed one office. We had no choice. When you're looking at saving 30 to 35% of your cost base, really that's major surgery. You don't have a choice. We couldn't reduce the size of the offices because they had a certain functional size: technician, draftsman, senior engineer, so on and so forth. You needed those things to produce work in that office. So closing an office was the only option. That was really difficult. I'm sure you can imagine the conversations that took place. There was a lot of unhappiness, and but everyone got through it. And people go and get other jobs. If any of you are ever facing that situation, it's very upsetting for everyone. But there aren't very many unemployed engineers around. People go and get other jobs, and life goes on. So that was probably the biggest lesson I learned. Not to be in no way blasé about that, but it's quite a big thing to do. But when you have to do it, and people do move on. So at last, we halted the financial losses, and the company culture started to pick up. We certainly raised the technical standards, which was necessary. We all have to have good technical standards in our work. But we continued to struggle with project delivery, fundamentally because the staff were quite inexperienced, and they couldn't do the stuff fast. They could do it well, correctly, but they just couldn't do it fast. That's still the case. So we're still trying to sort that out. Combination of reducing the diversity and training the staff. So, So reasons, firms need strong leadership, not nice leadership. But it's quite a difficult lesson to learn. You can't be friends with your staff, really. There's a degree to which you can be on good terms with them, but sometimes you have to tell people that they're not doing the right thing, they're not doing very well, or something like that. And it's easier to do that if you don't have a friendship relationship with your staff. Invoicing targets became part of the conversation. Absolutely essential. Everyone has to understand that it's a business to earn money. It's not a charity, not giving away work. My lesson, I had to be present. I had to get back onto the design office floor and be involved at that level. And then that last point is something I said earlier on. So what didn't work? Tinkering around the edges, high volume, low margin, making people do what they don't want to do. And then the things that were great, there's those things there. Nothing there I haven't talked about already. Not really. Weekly meetings, weekly management and cost control meetings, just staying in touch with all that stuff every week with my office manager, very important. Weekly project control meetings, we use Trello online, every job gets a ticket. We look at what was done last week, what's waiting, what's got a key action coming up. It's a useful piece of software. Happy to talk to anyone about that kind of thing. And the bank that took the pressure off. So before the big reorganisation, that was us. After the reorganisation, that's a different thing, really different thing. But financially, we're breaking even again. Maybe we're making some money. So that's necessary. That's where we got to. So I think things brightened up a bit at that point. And these would be the main lessons, really. You can't always grow. Sometimes you've got to get smaller to go back, to go forwards, whatever going forwards means for you. You've got to decide that. And you've got to make those tough decisions. I was weak. Shouldn't have been weak. Should have made those decisions earlier. You've got to recognise poor performance. It's too easy to be too generous. Sometimes you've got to be hard with people. Call it out for what it is, poor performance. The money has to work, and you've got to look after your health. my mental health took a beating, and I'm sure there's many people in this room whose mental health has taken a beating, either working in big companies, running their own company. You've got to look after yourself. You really have. Yeah. So things are better now. Thanks very much.